If someone had told me that an ordinary weekday with my grandson would change how I saw him forever, I would have laughed and brushed it off. I thought I knew Lucas. I thought I knew every line in his face, every nuance in his smile. But that morning, when he leaned in close and whispered a few quiet words, my whole body went cold, not from fear, not from anger, but from a heartbreak tangled with love that I still struggle to name. My name is Eleanor. I'm 77 years old, and I live in a calm little neighborhood where the loudest sounds most days are the mail truck or the neighbor's mower. My husband, God rest him, died 9 years ago, and from that day, the house has felt slightly too big, too quiet, and far too full of memories. That morning began like any other. I woke well before sunrise, as old bodies often do, and made my coffee just as I always have, 2 sugars, a splash of milk. Standing at the kitchen window, I watched the dim light slowly drive the darkness from the yard. Around 8, my daughter Rachel called. "Mom, can Lucas stay with you today?" she asked, the rush of morning life buzzing behind her. Of course, I said yes, without hesitation. Lucas is my only grandson, the lone boy in a line of women, and I spoil him endlessly. But after 77 years, you learn that love is one of the few things better given in excess. About 40 minutes later, he arrived. "Hey, Grandma," he said, his voice deeper than I still expected. He'd grown so much: broad shoulders, dark hair that looked perpetually tousled, thoughtful eyes carrying a weight beyond his 19 years. His backpack hung off one shoulder, his phone in hand, a young adult moving through the world cautiously. "You're too skinny," I told him, as I always do. He smiled politely, but the warmth didn't reach his eyes. That small detail made me pause. Lucas had always been transparent with his emotions. Joy or sadness showed on his face like a clear sky or a storm. That morning, something seemed pulled back, as though he were standing behind a wall. He built himself. "I already ate," he said, dropping his bag by the couch. "But I'll take some coffee if you've got any." I scoffed lightly. "What kind of house do you think this is?" He chuckled softly, a polite laugh that tried to cover tension. I poured coffee into my old brown cup, the one with a chip on the rim I refused to throw out, and handed it to him. We sat at the kitchen table, morning light spilling through the curtains, painting everything in warm gold. "How's school? How's life?" I asked. Lucas stirred his coffee, staring at the tabletop before replying. "It's fine," he said. I watched him carefully. Fine can mean anything, and often hides more than it reveals. His jaw was tight, his shoulders tense, his leg bouncing beneath the table like a motor that wouldn't stop. I spoke gently. "I know you, Lucas. That wasn't your fine. What's really going on?" For a moment, his eyes softened. "I'm just tired," he muttered. Then, almost reluctantly, he allowed the day to continue. He lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone, occasionally showing me a funny clip. I pretended to understand. Other times, he stared into space, hands idle, clearly wrestling with something internal. Lunch was simple: grilled cheese and tomato soup, the same I used to make when he was 10. He smiled at the familiar plates and bowls. "You still do it the same way," he said. "If it works, why change it?" I smiled. Conversation skimmed the surface: classes, weather, neighbors, but I could feel an invisible weight pressing against him. Something unspoken, yet tangible. Later, while rinsing dishes, I noticed him rubbing his hands together, a small, shaky breath escaping. The house was warm. "Lucas," I said, turning to face him, "talk to me." He blinked, pulled back from some distant place, and whispered, "I am talking." I shook my head gently. "No, you're talking around something." Our eyes met, and for the first time that day, I saw the storm gathering behind his calm expression. He looked away, murmuring, "Maybe later," and that was when I knew the ordinary day we expected had already begun to change. The afternoon unfolded quietly, but the tension hung between us like an invisible thread. I folded laundry while Lucas lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone, though his focus wasn't there. Occasionally, he'd show me a video, and I'd laugh just enough to keep the pretense alive, but I could feel him drifting further into himself. He seemed to carry a weight that wasn't his age, a heaviness no one should shoulder alone. Around noon, I prepared lunch: grilled cheese and tomato soup, the same comfort I'd served him since he was 10. Seeing the familiar plates, he smiled faintly. "You haven't changed a thing," he said. "Why fix what already works?" I responded with a shrug. We ate side by side, a muted documentary flickering on the TV, our conversation skimming only the surface. Whenever I tried to probe deeper, he skillfully steered it back to trivial matters. Still, I sensed something pressing against him, some invisible burden he couldn't shake. Later, while rinsing the dishes, I noticed a soft, shaky breath behind me. Glancing over, I caught his reflection in the kitchen window. He sat at the table, hands rubbing together as though trying to warm more than just his palms. "Lucas," I said, stepping closer, "what's wrong? Talk to me." He blinked slowly, like he'd been pulled from a distant place. "I am talking," he murmured. I shook my head. "No. You're talking around something. I can see it." His gaze dropped, then flicked up at me like he was gathering courage. "Later," he whispered. I nodded, letting him retreat for a moment. But silence doesn't always heal. It lingers, stretches, and sometimes forces truths to surface. I returned to folding laundry, glancing at him occasionally, watching the subtle shifts in his posture, the way his shoulders slumped, the leg tapping rhythmically. It was the language of someone holding back a storm. The hours slipped by in a rhythm of small, ordinary tasks. We watered the potted plants on the porch, side by side, listening to distant traffic, the neighbor's dog, and another mower starting down the block. Ordinary sounds, usually inconsequential, felt like a soft soundtrack under something heavier. I reached out to him, gently touching his shoulder as he leaned past me to reach a plant, and he didn't recoil. He was close, but still distant enough to guard himself. Then, almost quietly, he asked, "Grandma, do you ever feel like you're in the way?" The question caught me off guard. "In the way of what?" I asked. "Just in the way," he murmured, voice low. "Taking up space you don't deserve. Making things harder just by being there." My heart constricted. "No," I said firmly. "Never. Not in the way." "Why would you think that?" He shrugged hopelessly, as though the weight of the world was already etched into his shoulders. "No reason," he whispered. "But there's always a reason for a question like that." Evening drew near. We made dinner together: roast chicken, potatoes, a small salad. I watched him navigate my kitchen, reaching for dishes, opening the wrong drawer, laughing at himself. On the surface, it was just another visit. But beneath it, that invisible weight followed him, shadowing every gesture. After clearing the table and leaving the dishes to soak, I turned on the living room lamp, its soft yellow glow filling the space. "Come sit," I said, patting the cushion beside me. He sank onto the couch, a little closer than usual, not pressed against me, but not far either. I could feel his warmth even across that slight gap. The TV murmured in the background, but neither of us was watching. I could sense his breathing, controlled, deliberate, and occasionally, the subtle shifts in his posture as he gathered courage. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke. "Grandma, if I tell you something, will you promise not to get mad?" I turned to him fully, studying his young face. Eyes glossy, jaw clenched, words trapped behind his teeth. "I can't promise I won't feel anything," I said honestly, "but I promise I'll listen. I won't turn away." He swallowed. I don't really have anyone else I can say this to." That single line struck me with the force of a winter wind. To feel so alone, even with family around, cut deeper than I expected. "You have me," I said softly. "Go on." He stared at his hands, then at me, leaning in as if the walls themselves could hear. His voice dropped until it was almost nothing more than breath. And in that moment, I realized our day, ordinary in appearance, was about to become anything but. For a long moment, Lucas didn't speak. His eyes drifted toward the window, following the slow sway of the tree outside, as though the right words might be hiding somewhere in the branches. I didn't push him. Sometimes silence is the bridge someone needs before stepping onto difficult ground. When he finally inhaled, it sounded like he was pulling breath through a heavy door. "Grandma, I don't think people really see me," he said quietly. I blinked. "What do you mean?" He pressed his thumb into his palm nervously, a small habit he'd had since childhood. "I mean, they see what they want to. A good student, a quiet kid, someone who never makes trouble." He paused. "But no one sees what's happening underneath." My heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was revealing. This wasn't teenage moodiness. This was something deeper, sharper. I shifted slightly toward him. "Lucas, sweetheart, what is happening underneath?" He looked at me then, really looked, eyes filled with something raw, something I recognize from people who are carrying more than they should. I've been feeling wrong, like I don't fit into my own life. His voice trembled on the last word. I placed a hand gently on his arm. Feeling out of place doesn't make you wrong. He shook his head, swallowing hard. It's not just that. It's like I'm trying so hard to be the version of me everyone expects. But that mask gets heavier every day. He paused. I'm tired, Grandma. The word tired hit me with a jolt. Not physical tiredness. Something much deeper. A kind of emotional exhaustion. People rarely speak aloud. I tightened my hand on his arm. Lucas, are you safe? Right now. Sitting here with me, are you safe? He nodded quickly. Yes, I'm safe with you. I promise. Then his voice broke a little. That's sort of the problem. You're the only person I feel safe with. My chest tightened. No grandparent wants to be the only safe place. You want the world to hold your loved ones gently, not leave them clinging to a single anchor. I exhaled slowly. You can tell me anything, whatever it is. You won't face it alone. His lips parted like he wanted to speak again, but the words caught. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Every time I try to talk to Mom or Dad, they're busy, or stressed, or they say I'm overthinking. But I'm not. I know what I feel. I waited. He needed time. Finally, he said, I feel like everyone expects me to be perfect because I never complain. But inside, I'm struggling. His honesty cracked something open inside me, fear, compassion, love all tangled together. I spoke softly, cautiously. Struggling how? He closed his eyes. With myself. With who I'm supposed to be. With what I'm supposed to want. With what I actually feel. It's all mixed up. I nodded slowly. This wasn't a confession of wrongdoing. It wasn't something dark or dangerous. It was vulnerability, messy, honest, and painful. You don't have to have everything figured out at 19, I told him. You don't even have to understand every feeling. You just have to keep talking. Keep reaching out. He opened his eyes, shining with unshed tears. What if Mom and Dad don't understand? Then they'll learn, I said. Because loving someone means listening, even when you don't understand. He gave a small, shaky laugh. You make it sound easy. Oh, it won't be easy, I admitted. But it will be worth it. He leaned back against the couch, wiping under his eyes with the heel of his hand. I didn't plan on saying any of this today. I thought I could keep pretending everything was fine. But when I'm here, it's like I can finally breathe. My heart warmed, even as it ached for him. You don't have to pretend with me. For a while we just sat. The dim lamp cast a gentle gold glow across the room. The house creaked with its familiar old sounds. The quiet didn't feel heavy anymore, it felt like a blanket wrapped around us. Eventually, Lucas whispered, There's more. I turned to him slowly. Okay, whenever you're ready. He worried his bottom lip between his teeth. I've been carrying a thought for months. Something I haven't told a soul. I steadied my breath. Go on. He stared at his hands, fingers trembling just slightly. I'm afraid that if I say it out loud, everything will change. He wasn't wrong. Some truths shift entire relationships, but often, they shift them toward understanding, not away from it. I reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair away from his forehead, something I'd done since he was small. Lucas, whatever you tell me, my love for you won't change. Not ever. He nodded, exhaling shakily. Okay. Then he turned toward me, leaning in the slightest bit, voice dropping to a whisper so soft it barely existed. Grandma. The real reason I feel lost is because he hesitated. The moment held itself still, as though even the air was listening. I don't think I'm becoming the person everyone wants me to be. He breathed out hard, like the confession itself had been trapped inside him for too long. I took his hand in mine. Then let's figure out who you want to be. He looked at me, eyes wide with relief and fear mingled together, and just like that, the real conversation began. The room felt different after he said it, quieter, heavier, but in a way that told me we were finally standing in the truth instead of circling around it. Lucas sat back, wiping his palms on his jeans, like he'd just finished a long, painful task, but the truth wasn't finished with him yet. He took a shaky breath. Grandma, I keep thinking there's something wrong with me. I straightened instantly. There is nothing wrong with you. He shook his head. Then why don't I feel like everyone else? Why am I different? His voice cracked on the last word, and suddenly the entire day made perfect sense. The restlessness, the distant stares, the guarded expression he kept slipping into. This wasn't about rebellion or mistakes. It was about identity. A young man standing at the edge of adulthood, terrified. He didn't fit into the mold the world wanted for him. I reached for his hands, wrapping them gently in mine. Different doesn't mean broken. It means human. He swallowed. I don't want to disappoint anyone. You won't, I said softly. Not by being honest. He looked up, eyes searching my face for something permission, reassurance, maybe courage. But what if the person I want to become isn't who they expect? I squeezed his hands. Then they'll adjust. They love you. They may not understand right away, but they will try. His shoulders slumped. He exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for months. It's just, every time I try to talk to mom and dad, I freeze. I picture them looking at me differently. That fear, I said gently, comes from loving them. You don't want to lose that connection. He nodded, eyes lowering again. But real love, I continued, doesn't disappear when someone changes. It bends, it stretches, it grows. A single tear slipped down his cheek, and he brushed it away quickly, embarrassed. I didn't want you to see me like this, Lucas, I said, cupping his cheek with one hand. I've seen you through scraped knees, broken science projects, teenage heartbreak, and everything in between. You crying isn't going to scare me. He gave a small laugh at that soft, genuine. It eased something inside both of us. For a moment, we just sat there, breathing in sync, letting the weight of what he'd shared settle into the quiet. Finally, I asked, do you know who you want to be? Or are you still figuring it out? He hesitated, then shrugged, defeated. I don't know. I just know I'm not there yet. Wherever there is, that's okay, I said immediately. Most people don't know who they are until much later. Some figure it out at 20, some at 40, some at 75. He smiled faintly. What about you? When did you figure yourself out? I leaned back, thinking, a little at a time. Most of us grow in pieces, not all at once. He let those words settle, nodding slowly. I wish I wasn't so scared. Being scared, I said softly, means the thing you're facing matters. He looked at me again. So you're not disappointed in me? Never, I said firmly. I'm proud of you for speaking, for feeling, for trusting me. His eyes glistened with fresh tears. He leaned toward me, resting his forehead against my shoulder, like he used to when he was younger. I wrapped my arms around him, holding him close, feeling the warmth of his breath against my sweater. After a long moment, he whispered, thank you for listening. Always, I said, smoothing a hand over his back. When he pulled away, his expression had changed, still uncertain, still vulnerable, but lighter, less alone. So, what do I do now? He asked. We start small, I said. You talk to one person, maybe your mom, or your dad. You choose who feels safest. He nodded. Maybe mom, she's softer. Then start there, I said. You don't have to say everything at once. Just enough to open the door. He considered that, then inhaled deeply, as though rehearsing the moment in his mind. And Lucas? I added. He turned. You're not becoming the person they want you to be. I paused, touching his cheek once more. You're becoming the person you were meant to be. And that's enough. His chest rose with a trembling breath. A tiny smile broke through, fragile, hopeful. I think I needed to hear that, he murmured. I know, I said gently. Evening shadows draped across the room as the final sunlight faded from the windows. The world outside softened into a quiet blue, but inside, something new was taking shape, an understanding, a beginning, a promise that he wouldn't face his fears alone. He stood after a while. I should head home. Mom will worry. I nodded and walked him to the door. As he stepped out onto the porch, he turned back, voice calm for the first time that day. Grandma, I'm really glad I came today. I opened my arms, and he stepped into them without hesitation. Me too, I whispered, and as he disappeared down the path, shoulders a little straighter, steps a little lighter, I realized something. Sometimes the most ordinary days are the ones that change everything.